A miracle of sorts happened here in Missouri last year. Such a miracle of such astonishing proportions that it actually made it into the national news on ABC. A drunk driver hit another car, pinning a lovely 17-year-old girl in her car with critical injuries. According to the news reports, the use of the fire department's equipment to free the girl from the car was failing, and they were afraid that she was going to die where she was. So the frightened young woman asked for someone to come and pray for her. Out of nowhere, a priest shows up, and as priests are wont to do, he had anointing oil with him. He anointed the girl and prayed for her, and in fact, she did survive. The miracle of miracles was that the news video did not record the priest. No one saw where he came from or where he went to, and so the news dubbed him the guardian angel that just showed up. A minister friend of mine here in town was blown away by this miracle, and she even insisted that even I had to admit that God enters into human events and had sent an angel to this young woman's aid. I assured her that there would be an explanation that would not involve an angel. And sure enough, the priest in question, when he saw himself being called a guardian angel, he was a priest from Jefferson City. He was stopped by the accident like everybody else on the road. He got out to see if he was needed. Someone was asking for prayer. He prayed, and then here's the real miracle. He just left. He didn't ask for anyone to applaud him or reward him. He didn't even take up an offering. It was amazing. And the fact that he wasn't in the video, Bishop Spong, you can confirm, news agencies are never interested in what the clergy's doing. They never record us. So it was not a miracle at all. It was just a matter of fact. But for me, my pastor friend was angry with me because I seemed to her to be intent upon debunking the mystery of God's activity in the world. And the place that we've never been able to get to is for me to say the real miracle of a spiritual life is to show compassion when it's needed, where it's needed, without any reward or prompting or coercion. When people are able to see the world, as in this video that we were talking about earlier, This is Water, to be able to live in the environment of what actually is and to choose to act on radical compassion, that to me is all the miracle I'll ever need. Because the way that we talk about miracles in the traditional sense is really about magic and superstition. The essence of faith is when a person decides to step out of the self-centered worldview that we are born into and to choose to embrace a more connected, more kind, more loving, more compassionate way of living. And it's more than that. It's more than a way of thinking. And this is the greatest danger that liberals have, is that we think once we have an informed opinion, we have arrived. That once we have corrected the mythology and the superstition of our past and we have become informed and enlightened individuals, most of us go immediately into retirement and we don't act on it. The spiritual life has always been about orthopraxy and not orthodoxy. There's orthodoxy involved. I can't even claim to be indifferent about beliefs, but it's the practice. It's the practice of the faith. While the media in America was still blathering about miraculous appearances of angels in Missouri, the European Space Agency sent their Rosetta spacecraft and Philae lander, and they made science history. Mathematicians and engineers calculating through the gravitational pull of various planets, the propulsion necessary, the interference of our own atmosphere in the takeoff, and managed to land a washing machine-sized lander on a comet that was passing through our solar system at 34,000 miles an hour. Now, you may say that science doesn't get everything right, but to be able to land a lander on a comet moving 34,000 miles an hour, at some point we've got to be able to sit up straight and say that the gulf between scientific knowledge and religious belief is killing us. It's killing the churches. It's leaving us to look like nothing more than cultural dinosaurs. To paraphrase Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, and that is the first time that name has been mentioned in this room, it is time for religious people to stop being the stupid party. It is time for us to grow up, become rational, become critical thinkers, and decide who we are and what we believe. In my recently published book, of which there are a few copies around here, Progressive Faith and Practice, I explained the initial invention of religion as the attempt of ancient civilizations to cope with just two things. One was the capricious, chaotic, and unpredictable nature of the universe, and then their awareness of their own mortality, that their own death was in fact inevitable. The universe is unpredictable and uncontrollable, and I'm going to die. When humans become self-aware, they attempt to project a personality then onto the universe, onto the earth, onto the weather, onto agriculture, the seas, the skies, in order to account for why they're so capricious, that we gave the earth, the sky, the oceans names, and we talked about them as if they had temperamental moods and emotions. The earliest of religions did not, however, include a belief in life after death. Especially, though, in Western culture, where individualism seemed to be so increasingly important, it was impossible for people to contemplate a universe that could exist without ourselves in it, that I can't even imagine the universe going on without me. So somehow I must exist in some other way. And some Eastern religions have been cross-pollinated with this, but it isn't where religion started. For most people, it seems, the function of religion hasn't progressed very much over the last 10,000 years. That it seems to stay right at that level of trying to control the capriciousness of the universe and to assuage my fear of dying. From the time when ancient Palestinians believed that God sat on a throne in the heavens right above their temple, they thought God had a throne right above the Holy of Holies in the sky above Jerusalem, all the way up to the presidential candidacy announcement last month in Arkansas, when Mike Huckabee stood up and said that it was because they said a prayer at the beginning of the day, they said a prayer just before lunch every day. He said, that taught me that this exceptional country can only be explained by the providence of Almighty God. So you can see a Palestinian caveman and Mike Huckabee, and there's not 2 points of IQ that have changed between the two. That they are standing on the same ground. Jews thought that God had chosen them to rule the world. How convenient. Our religious book says that we're it. God believed that God had chosen them. Mike Huckabee would say that God created all the worlds, but that God really only likes white folk in America who vote Republican, because God's kind of funny that way. At this most simple and self-serving level, religion in most churches is basically what it was when a caveman first stood in the morning light and silently prayed for a successful hunt. But today I'd like to say a profound yes, but to myself, to my own publication. It is true that human consciousness led to the creation of ancient religions based on personification of aspects of nature and the universe, and a lust for some assurance that when we die, that we will not stay dead like our cows and pigs and chickens seem to die and stay dead. Yes, religion was initially a psychological balm to comfort the anxiety of primitive self-awareness, but that isn't all it was. And that isn't all it is. And that's not all that it must be if it is to survive at all. I could point to earlier historical quotes, but I like picking on Governor Huckabee. But his theological interpretation of what makes America great seems far too simplistic to me. And I do think America is great. I think America is a great nation, but not because of religious foundations. I think it was the American Enlightenment, which certainly had its seeds, its roots in the European Enlightenment, but the American Enlightenment had some interesting aspects to it that made it possible for us to become the nation we've become. Thomas Jefferson is famous for having taken his knife to the New Testament, cutting out every reference to miracles, any claim to divinity or immortality, and he preserved only what he believed to be the moral teachings that he found in the Bible. The primitive magical thinking and superstition, along with wishful thinking in hopes of invisible friends who might help you out of tight spots, Jefferson saw those as just the packaging that religion came in. And just because you want to throw away the packaging doesn't mean you want to throw away the content. Unlike many in our day who, once they give up on the packaging of religion, they're willing to toss the whole thing in the garbage, leaders of the American Enlightenment not only didn't reject religion, they doubled down on it. Because alongside of the more visceral motivation to create myths to help you cope with bad weather, a bad growing season, the capriciousness of the universe itself, your own illness, and your prospects of mortality, there's always been the dual purpose of trying to find meaning in the universe and to determine what it means to be a good person. My local church members tolerate my dual role as a professor of world religions, and they've often heard me speak of my love of the ancient Persian Zoroastrian religion that gave birth, I think, to post-exilic Judaism, early Christianity, and Islam. They taught that leading a good life is comprised of three things: right thoughts, right words, and right actions. Professor Mark Berkson of Heinlein University has distilled what he believes the core virtues of ancient worlds of thought, religion, cultures, Greek thought, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Christianity. He breaks down this way. He says the classical Greeks believed in wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Confucianism emphasized benevolence, propriety, righteousness, and wisdom. Buddhism emphasizes compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And Christianity he summed up as faith, hope, and charity. Now, a reasonable person could argue with any one of those synopses of those schools of thought, but it's a broad outline of what it means to be a good person in each of these religions and civilizations. In Greek society, you probably would have been talking about a good citizen. What are the qualities that make up a good citizen? Confucius spoke often of being a gentleman, and what he meant was what we more commonly would call a gentleman and a scholar, someone who had that depth of character. Buddhism, I don't think Buddhism can be meaningfully discussed without mentioning detachment, but the ideal Buddhist is someone who lives without greed or competition and is at harmony with all others and peace within themselves. Christianity is a little harder because we know more about it. It's the mountain we stand on. Clearly, he's drawing on Paul's letter to the Roman church, but if you could translate faith to mean a courageous commitment to principle, and charity to mean both compassion and unjudging love, then I might say that I'm pretty satisfied with his summation. But what I would ask you to notice about this list, even the beginning with Zoroastrianism, is that there is no need for a supernatural theistic person in the heavens to make any of them true. In each of those cultures throughout history, virtue is true in an existential way. Virtue becomes its own evidence. Leading a good life improves the quality of your life, and I suspect the rest of your family would say that it improves the quality of their life when you improve virtue in your own life. It is a gift that we give to the universe. A Buddhist monk is almost always seen to be smiling, even when they're talking about something that's absolutely tragic or horrible. And they will explain that the smile is a choice to give the gift of joy to the world, even in the midst of crisis. But you see, none of this is natural. That whole list of virtues and qualities, none of those come naturally. There is no path of least resistance to sainthood. Theft, violence, self-serving appetites, tribalism, racism, those are natural. Virtue is a choice. Virtue is a matter of practice, of discipline, of determination. To reference our American Enlightenment once more, in a memoir written for his son, Ben Franklin described how he methodically identified 13 virtues and wanted to take them on one at a time to make each one of them part of what it meant to be Ben Franklin. You wouldn't be surprised to know that thrift was on the list. That's what we tend to remember Ben Franklin for. But so was moderation and the ability to be silent, humility, the courage of convictions, temperance, productivity, orderliness, cleanliness. Folks, he even mentioned chastity. I don't think he was any better at it than any other politician that's followed him, but it made the list at least. The point is that religion, the good part of it, the virtues that we need to bring into the 21st century are not accidental, and they are not occasional associations with your faith. That when someone asks you, what do you believe? What does your church believe? What does your church teach? You don't start with, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate. You should be able to start with compassion. You should be able to say, what my church believes is that love is my religion. You should be able to say that we are above judging other people, that we are believers in forgiveness and reconciliation, deep and lasting friendships, commitments that are not challenged or broken by the vicissitudes of living. Practicing a faith is about carefully identifying who you want to become, not even who you are. Because I know several of you and you're stinkers. It isn't just pouring concrete around your current position to say, I have arrived. And I challenge you to listen to the religion that is being used in the political field at this time. It is always self-congratulatory. It never sets a mark of what we should do more of, how we should evolve to become better people or to make the world a better place. They use religion as an apologetic for why we go to war, for why we don't care of the sick, why we allow so many people to enter poverty. Religion, spirituality for the 21st century has validity, has meaning, has purpose, if it changes us, if it makes us better people, and if it leads us to make the world a better place. I think that's best done in community. I really do. I think I am a better person in a faith community than I am out of a faith community. I'm not doing that well in a faith community. Out of a faith community, heaven only knows. We don't read religious texts in a progressive church to satisfy God. We read them because they're supposed to somehow instruct our character, to inspire us to try again. We don't pray to ask God to enter into human history and fix something. As the current Pope has said, we pray for the hungry, then we feed the hungry, because that's how prayer works. That's the only way it works. We engage in reflective meditation in the hope that we can gain insights into how we can be better people. We don't sing to placate the ego of a divine entity that sits in the clouds, waiting, expecting to be praised. We sing because the poetry of music is often much more powerful in its inspiration than is the spoken word. Now, I have to exclude country music and Italian opera from that. That's some silly stuff right there. If there is to continue to be a church in the latter part of the 21st century, certainly it must be a place that is free of the packaging of Iron Age mythology and superstitious thinking. I believe that every educated member of clergy already knows this and would be saying it if they were not afraid of unemployment. But unemployment is coming, men and women. It is coming if we continue to try to bolster belief in absurdities and remain loyal to creeds rooted in truth claims that have no substance whatsoever, other than the fact that they are mildly familiar to us and they might make a memorial service go down a little easier. The recently released Pew Research study that looked at church affiliation confirmed what Bishop Spong told us 20 years ago, that the fastest growing religious group in America is the Church Alumni Association. More than 5 million fewer mainstream Protestant members now than just 7 years ago. And the population of the United States has gone up by 18 million in those 7 years. So the church is smaller in a bigger country. It is as if we have lost 10 million people in the last 7 years. The old myths, the ancient threat of eternity in hell or promises of heavenly bliss, the neurotic guilt and the fear that traditional religion used to get traction in a previous age. I thank God that the current generation's just not going to buy that stuff anymore. It just isn't going to have any traction. It was always a seriously messed up message. It was always neurotic. That such nonsense survived over the past 200 years is incomprehensible to me. In the presence of the scientific method, of higher critical thought, of mass communication, I don't know how some of that silly stuff has made it to 2015. But you can hear the bell tolling. They don't have long. So if the church is going to have a reason to exist, surely it is to raise a prophetic voice to challenge the evils of our present society in the big picture and to individually draw that down to the teaching, encouraging, and even confronting of those evils in ourselves and in each other. You will not accidentally stumble into sainthood. Now, every one of us is naturally a hero in their own novel. Very few people can describe the crises of their own life without making it sound like they were somehow misunderstood. We will become the good people we want to be when we help to bring about the good society that we know should exist, only by making courageous and fearless commitment to self-examination, by being determined to work and sacrifice to be better people, and by being willing to encourage others to do exactly the same thing. I don't know if the church is going to survive. I really don't. It doesn't look that good right now. I don't know if the church will survive the death of superstition. I do know that I hope it will. I hope it will. I know I'm staying. Even in my advanced years, I'm nowhere near being the person that I hoped I would be by now. I need more work. I need more time. And I need to be in community to make those changes. This is no time for the church to be consigned to the same museum that now houses the Confederate flag that once stood in front of the State House in South Carolina. This is no time for the church to be consigned to the pages of history where now the oppression of gay and lesbian couples must now be consigned. Our better graduate schools of religion have tried to liberate the church from magical thinking and superstition for generations. They have failed because the church has not embodied what they had learned. It will not happen until pastors and congregations have the courage to let go of their ancient creeds that support those myths and to step into the light of modern reason. Under steeples everywhere, people are challenging one another to deny reason and to hold on to superstition, while outside of our church walls, the income disparity that threatens to create a permanent peasant class in the United States of America is growing. the excesses of the military-industrial complex that drives us into senseless wars for corporate profit, all that Eisenhower warned us about 60 years ago, has only become stronger and more insanely deadly and exploitative. The racism that defined our nation 200 years ago has not gone away. It has become more subversive, more subtle, but I guarantee you it is no less toxic. And our planet faces profit-driven challenges that threaten to make our only habitable planet uninhabitable. There is no planet B. There is no other choice. But the chase for profit may make the earth uninhabitable. And so I implore you, as the poet and musician Bruce Cockburn said it, we are lovers in a dangerous time, and it is incumbent upon all of us to keep kicking at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. Amen.
You have been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at Rev. Dr. Ray at AOL.com for more information.